know earlier we had our closing remarks, we had closing address, so I know for most of us the brain goes, okay, we're out, deuces, thanks so very much Caribbean Investment Forum. For those of you who have decided to stay with us for a very important conversation, we thank you so very much. We've been hearing all the discussions, and so now it's so important to pull it together. Yes, digital is important. Yes, technology is important. Yes, growth and diversification, all of these things are important and they are critical for our growth. But what is even more important is actually the investment that we put into the people and to the planet in a very nice, seamless manner. Therefore, we now open it up for the regional IPA Roundtable with the topic, Empowering Sustainable Growth, Building a Resilient Caribbean by Investing in People, Planet, and Profits. Our esteemed moderator, he's been here, he's been involved, he's been doing the videos. I've seen you in the corner of my eye. Rudolph Hanamji, moderator, Senior Manager, Business Development, Ernst & Young Caribbean. Ladies and gentlemen, kindly put your hands together as we welcome him to the stage.
Thank you, Dr. T. So you've been keeping us going for the last mile. But, you know, good afternoon to all our domestic and visiting international parties, heads of state and bodies, and of course the investors in the room. But this afternoon, particularly our investment promotion agencies. So as Terry said, I now serve EY Caribbean. But before, just a few months ago, I actually sat where some of you all sit now. I worked as an IPA. So I understand, and so does my team, because EY served some of these IPAs across the region, exactly what language you need to speak, especially in the changing times. So over the last 3 days, you have heard a lot of deep discussions about where we need to move as a region. And we worked and collaborated with Carib Export and the organizers, the co-hosts of this event, to plan this very tailored and strategic intervention, because our focus is to make a better working world and now a better working, more sustainable Caribbean region. So we want you to use this afternoon's intervention as a takeaway, a checklist, a roadmap, if you will, a teaser, to begin implementing some of the actions that you all discussed and heard about during the last 3 days. So most of you would know EY as an assurance or even a taxation advisory services firm. And over the last few days, I've got that a little bit. What are you guys doing here? Well, if you don't know, you should know that international standards related to ESG, environmental, social, governance, and sustainability frameworks are coming down the line. And your friendly neighborhood auditors are going to have to assist you in reporting on that. But before you get to that stage, my team is going to share with you some insights about how you strategize, how do you incorporate ESG and sustainability into your strategic plans so that that value proposition you heard about earlier today is strengthened and we can remain competitive. So that's why we're here. And it's important to ensure that you understand and use this opportunity to ask as many questions as you need to while our team is here on the ground with you. So may I have the next slide, please? So we have a very, very straightforward agenda for you today. And in order for us to bring this home, I want you to know that EY, as the region's largest professional services firm that operates in 8 territories, so wherever you are IPA, we're next door, we've actually invested in homegrown talent that works alongside our global subject matter resources. Next slide, please. Next. So I would like to introduce our team. We have Maria Daniel, who is my lead partner in strategy and transactions, and just took on the role of lead partner for sustainability across the region, across our EY Caribbean footprint. With over 20 years of experience in the strategy and transactions field, Maria has advised all of the top performing firms and many SMEs in the sectors across verticals and horizontals who have actually gone on to become large players in different sectors. And some of you may know her as the former president of the FinTech Association of Trinidad and Tobago. So again, you're getting first-hand advisory knowledge, someone who has been in the trenches and is really a passionate player for people, planet, and profits. You will then hear from one of our subject matter resources, Carlos Adams. He is out of our UK office. As a matter of fact, he just traveled back from Saudi Arabia, I believe, where he has been advising other IPAs across the globe and the UK government on how to attract investment. So again, you're going to get it firsthand from Carlos. You will then hear from one of our executive directors, Marcus Jardine. Marcus has over a decade of experience advising persons in governance issues around data and how important it is if you're going to be reporting and creating this value proposition. What do you need to do as an IPA and an investor, really, anybody, around your governance structures? And then my office roommate, ED Executive Director Lily Budram Karim, who is one of our specialists in valuations, modeling, and econometrics, is going to share with you some important insights around what are those other economic indicators that we must be looking at other than GDP and jobs when you're talking ESG and sustainability. And she has a special surprise. We worked with all of you all over the last few weeks and Carib Export and Kuiper to develop a teaser for a regional dashboard. So I'll let Lily share that news. I don't want to take away her thunder. But Maria, over to you. And ladies and gentlemen, prepare yourself.
Thank you, Rudy. See why he's such a great business development manager. He just sold EY in 5 minutes. So today what we really want to do is kind of bring together everything that has been discussed over the last few days. And you know, when you're the last and you're bringing it all together, you want to ensure that we don't duplicate what others have said, but rather to internalize what has been said and make it practical. You know, a lot of times, you know, we do a lot of these conferences, we sit, we talk, we know what the problems are, people put up solutions, but the execution is where we fail. So this afternoon, when we take you through this journey, is first, what are the issues? What is the debate? We're here to discuss investment. We're here to discuss economic growth. We're here to look at our region, and I would use the word region, because one of my pet peeves, and you know, Rudy said passionate, the men like to call it emotional, I'll take passionate. But at the end of the day, we are a region made up of many small islands. We are made up of many different cultures, many different strengths, many weaknesses. But what we have failed to do, however, is bring that together to make us as a region with a competitive advantage. And when I work with IPAs and when I work with Rudy, when he wasn't one before, my question was, how have you identified what we could bring as an investment different to others? And how are we building that out so that we are competitive when we are competing for jurisdictions? So the whole question of economic development, and there is a lot of debate. I went to the Suriname Oil and Gas Conference earlier this year, and there were quite a few ministers across the region. And they were like, you know, this is just the developed world coming again to dictate to us of what to do or not do. So the decision or the debate is around, you have done your mess, you have created, I wouldn't say climate change is real or climate change is coming, climate change is here. Right? So if we look around the region right now, the level of flooding that we see happening is just increasing. So we ask this question to everybody, do you think the Caribbean is equipped to manage loss and damage? Of course, a significant no. So when we're starting to think about investments as well, and just think of it from an investor perspective, if we feel that we are not equipped to deal with loss and damages, is this going to be the place that you will want to invest your money in? So we could ignore climate change. We could, say we still have to develop, but investors are now looking at to see where are the countries that will have resilience. Because if they put their investment in countries that do not have an adaptation or mitigation plan, then they are going to think, what is going to be my damage or loss? So we have to think about, from the perspective, is thinking about sustainability, is thinking about decarbonization and climate action really going to cost us economic growth and development, or is it going to make us grow more if we do it smartly? And that's really what we want to explore today. And we also want to explore, and Carlos is going to come in after me, to see how is the dynamic changing. Now companies are considering, what is my carbon footprint? When you heard Rudy talk about the standards, and I'm not going to get into that, I'm not an auditor, but what we are here to do is talk about how you can decarbonize in a way that drives your development, drives your growth, give you those metrics that will make you competitive. That's how you have to think now. And if we're too late to deal with this, understanding that anyone who's looking at investment now is going to look at carbon footprint, is going to look at emissions, they're going to look at, when we talk about green, is it transparent, can we validate it? So the work that I have been doing in Suriname, which is a good example of how we could talk about this subject. So Suriname is 93% forest cover. They also have oil and gas reserves. Guyana is also in the same exact position, but even in a larger way. But the question is, okay, we could get money from oil and gas, hydrocarbons, building out up and downstream, but we can also now get from our green forests. And what we have been working with Suriname is to monetize that forestry by making their carbon credits accreditable. So we can then go to the capital markets and trade it. So my point being here, economic development can be funded by conserving your forests. So the way that mechanism will work is we will actually raise capital off of Suriname's forests, which will now be distributed for the same way taxes are into the communities, the indigenous people, health, education. But what we have to ask, and anybody coming to invest in our country, you can invest, but how are you going to ensure that we are maintaining our green at the same time? So climate change is about adaptation. Climate change now is about mitigation. So economic development has to work with climate change. And that's how we kind of have to position ourselves. So let's just look at one of the other polls. And let me tell you, so things must be happening. People must be listening a little more. When we ran this same poll, I think earlier this week, it was like this. So it was, yes, it will stop our economic growth. Most people said that. And no was down here. And now I'm seeing it's pretty even. So I think people are now rethinking, okay, just because we're trying to save the planet doesn't mean we have to give up profit. But how are we going to make everything transform? The way the world measures success hasn't changed. And we've always been taught what is measured, what is monitored, how are we rewarded is going to drive change. So we're stuck with this GDP per capita, which everybody looks at. And what these graphs are really showing you is growth in GDP per capita does not mean that we're having a better quality of life. So when we talk about people, planet, and profits, all we have focused on before was really the profit. We haven't focused enough, as we know, from the people side or the climate side. So then now, the only way we're going to get countries to want to transform is we have to reward that. And the way we're saying you're going to be able to do that is to change the metrics in which we measure ourselves. And if we get, even from an investment perspective, the metrics changing of what makes a good country to invest in, then we might see change coming faster. So let's just look at the well-being economy. And let's see how could we possibly look at measuring our economies different. How could we sell the region different without trying to compare to GDP per capita, which we may never reach, to the 20 or 30 successful countries in the world? So let's look at the environmental measures. We have biodiversity, which is a big topic right now. Even in the carbon market, we're looking at, should we value a ton of carbon differently from a country that has more biodiversity than one that doesn't? Looking at air quality pollution, again, an investor wants to come and know that where they're coming is cleaner than where they are, and will also help them with their carbon footprint. Social measures, food security, education, poverty, and crime. As we can see right here in Trinidad and Tobago, where we are one of the highest GDP per capita in the region, we're also one of the highest in crime. So are we more successful if our population is not feeling safer? So again, as an investor, you will be looking at crime, security. That's going to be one of the factors you're looking at. So if one of our measures is how much have we reduced crime over time, rather than how much we've increased GDP per capita, what is going to be more favorable to an investor? Governance measures, corruptions, public trust. Again, we are seeing where, transparency, trust, all of these things are much more important to investors. Can you see what? So where am I use here? Yeah. Okay. Because we're getting a feedback. Ooh, this is hard for me to stand up in one place. Okay. So apparently there's feedback, so I'm going to stand up here. So this is just to kind of say, if we really want to change the way the world we live in, if we do want to drive the change, if we want to look at economic development and we want to look at investment, the discussion here today, and this is not only going to be presentation, but what we want to be able to do is to hear what you have to say about some of these things. Right? We want to look at the end of the day, I work on the transaction side, and bankers are saying globally, PE funds are saying, we are looking at our portfolio now. We want to understand what are the companies we are investing in, what is their carbon footprint, what is their ambition to reduce their carbon footprint for us to invest our money in them. So we have to understand that the money is following people who are adapting to and trying to embrace people, planet, and profit. So just that alone is a reason for us to really start bringing this transformation to our countries and to our companies. When you're looking at comparing where the international funds are going, and I think someone mentioned to me just before the presentation that somebody said, well, okay, do you know how much it's going to cost me to change all my trucks and my fleet? If I want to get green, where am I going to get the funding in order to do this transformation? I can tell you here and now, there's funding all around the world. In the work that we do, we have various agencies coming to us and saying, Maria, we have the funding, where are the projects? And it's the type of projects they want to see. And when I mean type, it's not just what we're trying to solve, but where the feasibility is, where's the commerciality? And that's where the problem in the region is, actually getting the right projects for investment. So we have to continuously think about what do we need to do differently and how do we do it differently, because the funding and the financing, I can stand up here without any doubt or any risk of saying something I cannot deliver. There is funding. And what we also have to think about is on the conservation side, the emitters, we won't call them the bad people, the emitters are looking for offsets. And for you who don't understand what an offset is, I'll put it in a very practical, individual way. So let's say my bad habit is buying shoes and clothes. I have no shame in saying that. I'm very much woman. But my offset is I drive an electric car. So what I'm doing is where I am contributing to emission, I'm using my electric car to offset, so net, I'm zero. So that's how we have to think. When we are looking at investment in certain industries, how are we going to balance that from the conservation efforts we have, from preserving our oceans, our mangroves, our forests, so that when someone is looking at the region, and I say region again, because this is a topic we cannot look at from island alone. We have to look at a region, we have to look at having the same frameworks, the same legislation, so that eventually, hopefully, we can have a regional carbon market. And when someone is looking to invest in the region, they don't have to deal with 10 different frameworks. So when we talk about investment, we have to think about getting the regulators together, getting the governments together, and the powers that be, so that we can have one framework from a sustainability perspective, so we can fight climate change together. So I'm going to just stop there now and let Carlos take over, who's actually going to speak about the real investment side. Where is FDI looking to go into? What are some of the criteria now? And how has climate change and sustainability changed the view of what is favorable from an investment climate perspective? Thank you. Carlos? I'm not too sure. Let me just get you there.
Great. Can you hear me now? Perfect. Well, it's great to present to you all today, and yeah, thank you for inviting me along. And it's yeah, it's a really obviously hot topic to talk to. Just go to the next slide. So I lead the FDI Centre of Excellence, Global So, sorry, if we go back one slide. Thank you. So, as Maria said, we work on both sides of the coin, and as a firm, we've got our international location advisory service. So this is really kind of informing us of what investors actually look for. So these are some of the companies where we've actually helped them find that location. As you'd imagine, we do have separation between the two, kind of work with the government and work with the private sector, but we are able to share intelligence when it allows us to kind of benefit the client in a useful way, in a way that doesn't kind of breach their sensitivities. But these are some of the ones you can imagine the kind of insight we've got from a sectoral point of view, the insight we've got from a regional point of view, on what companies are looking for. So when we work with IPAs, we're obviously able to come with a real fresh mindset of, you're looking at this sector, this is what we're seeing in the market, let's build those value propositions in the right way, and let's really target those companies with the messaging that we know will resonate with them. And then I wanted to give a couple examples of where we've done this before. So from a strategy point of view, we wrote the Lithuanian Investment Promotion Agency strategy, so thinking about what sectors they want, and it's been a really successful one as they're one of the up-and-coming IPAs and really making an established name for themselves amongst FDI locations in Europe. Our lead generation has been taken on from all across France, both at a national level with Business France, but also at a regional level for regional IPAs. And then investor outreach, also the use Ministry of Investment of Saudi Arabia. The Middle East is a place which is reaching out to all corners of the globe for investment right now. Whether it's kind of off the back of sporting events or if it's part of a diversification away from oil. So what we did was we mobilized 6 offices, strategically placed to work on behalf of MISA, the Saudi Arabian FDI outfit. And then we went out and had different regions, looked after by those offices and worked on behalf of them as well. So that was something that we were able to do in that kind of investor outreach capacity. And as Rudy said at the top, I just got back from Saudi, kind of working with the special economic zone there, and they're really seeing that shift to ESG as well, and obviously as an oil-producing nation and a nation which is, rooted in its oil economy and petroleum-based economy, this is quite a shift for them because they're obviously having to attract things with a more ESG mindset, with a more kind of sustainability lens on how they attract investment, what's the longevity of projects. Companies aren't wanting to do this short-term investment anymore, nor are IPAs wanting to have those short-term investors. And then the kind of project and account management, so that's that. Sorry, if we go back one slide. Yeah, back one slide. So that's what we've been doing on the Department of International Trade. So as Maria said, we've been working with the UK government for the last 5-6 years, and that's a team of 120 people, kind of working on everything from strategy all the way through to kind of getting the investment realization done. And yeah, very, very keen to kind of share more about that as we move on to the discussion.
Thanks, Carlos. Given the time constraints, we just need to I want you all to see the dashboard and to hear Marcus. But just to kind of put this in a very short way, you saw the process, you saw the funnel. So that's where we need to be, right? So, it's not just saying that we're going to get into agri-tech or we're going in to get to digital economy, we're going to get into ICT. There's a whole lot of criteria that companies look at before they decide where they're going. And the data is available on everyone else. So one of the things we need to even be noticed is to have data that could contribute. So when these type of programs are run, we have to show up. But what I will do now is hand over to Marcus Jardine, who, just going through the journey, is going to, so how do we do this? How do we get ourselves ready to even be noticed from an ESG perspective? Marcus.
Everyone, and thanks, Maria. I wanted to just start off by saying, I know it's the graveyard shift in the afternoon. I promise my presentation is only 3 slides. I won't take too long. I know sometimes governance isn't the hottest subject to have in the afternoon, but there's just a few salient points I want to get to. So first of all, if we could go to the survey, and thanks everyone for participating in the survey. So we did a survey in terms of which you perceive as the biggest challenges facing the Caribbean, and you can see by far and away the biggest two would be lack of transparency with government and lack of governance. Now, I will be talking a bit about governance, and after this, Lily will come and talk about data. Other issues there is limited expertise, lack of projects to invest in, competition between Caribbean. So basically, these things that we're seeing are not really that uncommon in an emerging area, particularly an area as complex as ESG. And as a region, we don't really need to beat ourselves up too much, because in terms of all these surveys you see globally, ESG readiness is not really where you expect it to be and where you need it to be. So we're not alone in being not really prepared for where you want to be for ESG. But the one thing we have to bear in mind with that is that there's generally at least 18 months to 24 months time lag between your starting point and actually getting to a point where you have confidence in your disclosures and the robustness of them that you can share with the stakeholders and build trust, etc. So the message is that if you're starting now, you really do have a time lag, so the sooner you start, the better you get on with it. Now, before I actually get into governance at an organizational level, I just want to touch on the global reporting standards. Now, the global reporting standards are really there to indicate to us what stakeholders view as meaningful, as important, as what they will use to base their decision-making in terms of which regions they want to participate in, who they want to partner with, where they want to spend their money. Now, the challenge is that if we're using this as a guideline to see what is meaningful, there's what we would call an alphabet soup of reporting standards at the moment. In fact, at one point, there was actually up to 600 different ESG and climate-related reporting disclosures. And on top of that 600, there were also additional voluntary disclosures and assessments that third parties were asking companies to do. Now, the challenge with this number of disclosures and conflicting standards was that people were really struggling to understand, well, how is ESG measured? What does good look like? How do we know if we're getting better? So on one side, you have this real energy and enthusiasm from stakeholders to start ESG programs. And on the other side, you have this confusion about, well, what is important and how do we show that we're doing it? And coming out of this whole sort of fog in terms of regulations, it was one of the contributing factors to various scandals we saw in terms of greenwashing. I'm also a certified fraud examiner, and one of the phenomena we were seeing in this fog was ESG fraud. And that happens on two levels. First of all, there's the internal level where people were manipulating their ESG data because there were internal bonus programs and incentives that they wanted to achieve. And then externally, entities were actually manipulating their ESG programs to appear that they had certain prerequisites to partner with companies to transact. So the good news is that with the arrival of the ISSB and these standards, this should go a long way to creating some harmonized universal standards for ESG disclosures and reporting. Now, the ISSB is affiliated with the IFRS, which, as probably a lot of people would know, is responsible for accounting disclosures and is a long-standing institution in about 140 jurisdictions worldwide. In terms of accounting disclosure, it is seen as the baseline and the global standard. And over time, the expectation is that the sustainability standards by the ISSB will be viewed with the same rigor as their financial reporting standards and be seen as the global benchmark for disclosure and reporting. So there will be the global standards, but the ISSB will also allow additional reporting requirements at a local level and local jurisdictions where there may be a need. So in parallel to the ISSB, we do have the European Directive, which is the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Standards, and they do have a spectrum of reporting standards in terms of sustainability. And these apply to all large organizations in the EU. They apply to organizations whether they're listed or not. They even apply to any large subsidiaries in the EU, whether these companies are EU-based or not. Once you have a subsidiary in the EU, you have to comply. And actually, the EU standards, they actually go a bit further than the US standards in terms of they tend to look at sustainability not just from opportunities and risks at an enterprise level, but at a wider societal level and environmental level. So they look at the impact of your organization in terms of what it's actually doing to the indirect stakeholders and report on that. This is all part of the EU's Green Deal and their ambition to become the first net zero continent. So it's important that we do get in a position where we understand these regulations and we can respond to them, because like I said, ultimately these universal standards will be seen as the guideline and the barometer that investors will use and all stakeholders will use to determine where they want to participate, who they want to partner with. So as a region, we need to get ready and set up our governance and our programs to meet these standards. Now, I'd just like to talk quickly about some of the consistent themes and emerging trends we are seeing with these standards. Again, this is important because this tells us what is meaningful to our stakeholders, what they want to be informed about so they can make decisions in terms of who to partner with, where they want to participate, what regions, etc. So by far and wide, the most important trend we're seeing is an increased level of granularity and disclosure. And for this, I'm talking about the consultation drafts that have been issued by the European Directive, by the ISSB, by the SEC. You know, long ago, your ESG disclosures could have been a value statement, some high-level policy and procedures and a framework. Now, these standards expect you to actually disclose what parties and what individuals are actually responsible for driving sustainability throughout the organization, who's going to deliver it. In terms of that, they also want to know the competencies and capabilities of these individuals. So that is why you're seeing the emergence of roles like a chief sustainability officer. You're seeing board committees, which are subcommittees solely charged with sustainability. And they want to see the skills and competencies around them. They want to see them at two levels. First of all, in terms of your board competencies to make sure they can oversee the programs, and then also your management capabilities and your executive capabilities to actually execute and implement the programs. The other area we're seeing a lot of movement in would be in terms of assurance and compliance. Most of these standards at the moment are voluntary, but when these consultation drafts are completed, there is going to be much more of a mandatory compliance and a mandatory requirement to make disclosures. And along with that, there's going to be the expectation that you can provide limited assurance initially, but it will move to reasonable assurance around these disclosures, which would be similar to the same rigor that is applied to the accounting standards by the IFRS. If you are making disclosures in your financial reports, you do need to have a certain level of independent assurance around the controls for your financial reporting. There will be an expectation with sustainability standards that there is similar controls and that you can demonstrate that whatever ambitions you are putting forward, that there is rigor, that your stakeholders can take confidence in this. So there will be a lot more compliance focus on it. Finally, and this is really being driven by Europe, there's a move to a multi-stakeholder rather than just your direct stakeholders like your investors, your lenders, your creditors, to wider stakeholders. In Europe, they are much more looking at a society level of materiality rather than just an enterprise level. Again, this is happening in Europe, but the SEC, who have put forward their sustainability drafts, they have also said that they plan to follow up with further disclosure requirements in terms of diversity and inclusion and then human capital. So across the globe, they are expanding the multi-stakeholder approach to disclosures. In terms of the detail, I just want to touch on a few things in the colorful diagram there. Well, I mentioned in terms of the governance, board, skills, and mandates, but in terms of strategy, what they are expecting in disclosures now is they want to see the impact of governance around your climate risks and opportunities, your ESG risks and opportunities, how they will impact your financial position, your financial performance, and your financial position in terms of your sources of capital, your access to funds, your investments, your financial position in terms of how these risks and opportunities in ESG will affect your costs and your revenue. They want to see transition plans. Now, this is partly voluntary at the moment, but the philosophy from the regulators are that if you want to disclose in terms of your ESG ambitions that you are going to get to net zero, or you are going to get to zero waste, or even if you have any sort of waste reductions, emission reductions, societal ambitions, and you want to disclose these to your stakeholders because they're meaningful to them, they are going to ask you to provide some level of transition plans in terms of how you're going to get from where you are now to that net zero position. And like I said, they'll want these transition plans to be supported by metrics and by scenario analysis to show that you do have some level of certainty around how you're going to achieve these things. The next area is risk management. Again, they want much more detail in risk management in terms of your inputs, the data you're going to use, your key assumptions. And one interesting thing as well about risk management is a lot of the language in all the disclosure drafts now always talks about ESG risks and opportunities. It makes sure to use the language around opportunities and what methodologies and approaches you have to spot climate opportunities and ESG opportunities and bring those in. So the disclosure looks at it from both sides, particularly the upside. In terms of metrics and targets, well, they won't just expect global metrics, they expect industry-specific metrics, and this will then move towards benchmarking, etc. So you will be able to demonstrate where you stand when you make your compliance disclosures. So again, there is going to be a lot more rigor around these things. The last point in metrics is, particularly in Europe, they're looking to move towards comparison to international agreements. Now, the main international agreement, obviously, would be the Paris Agreement. But beyond that, if your region or your territory makes any particular agreements in terms of their ambitions, they will want to see how your plans, your transition plans, and your metrics and targets actually contribute to these international agreements and how your organization is contributing to these global targets. So this level of rigor is coming. We do have time, but if we can prepare for it and meet these sort of requirements, it will really be a big competitive advantage for us in terms of demonstrating that we are the region to partner with. We have that trust. And this is my last slide. As promised, it was only 3. Now, there is a lot of words on this slide, so I do apologize, but the only thing I really wanted to bring out here is that when we bring it down to the organizational level, the goal is really just to extend what you are doing now and to use that. Most organizations with varying degrees of formality, but all, particularly if you're involved in investments and finance, etc., should have an enterprise risk management function and an internal control framework. Now, these things are well evolved and they are used by all organizations in terms of looking at your risk universe, looking at what's out there, and actually making sure that you're prepared for it, you plan for it, that you do have robust controls around it to make sure that these strategies are delivered, that your disclosures are up to date, and if not, that you do have corrective plans. The key is to realize that at the end of the day, ESG and ESG risks and opportunities are just like any other business risk that an organization faces. And the key is to make sure that within these frameworks, you have individuals with the right competencies asking the right questions. And this will start with your tone at the top and making sure that they can actually push ESG through these channels. So just like any good business would, you'd start with the risk universe that you may face in your organization, and you'd make sure you have the right people with the right tone, making sure that that risk universe also includes any climate risks and opportunities that are out there, any other ESG risks and opportunities. And then you will just bring that into the dialogue of your risk management framework in terms of, well, if we are facing these risks, what are we doing about it? Do we have a plan? How is that plan being implemented? Do we have contingencies? If people ask us and our stakeholders, can we robustly answer these questions? And that will be done by bringing these risks onto the agenda, and they are immediate risks, putting them through your existing frameworks. So that would be the main gist of it. I just want people to remember there is a certain amount of tendency for people to get paralyzed when they talk about ESG. It's too complex, it's too intrinsic, it's impossible to measure, it's a distraction from our core business. But the answer is you already are doing risk management, you're already doing internal controls at your organization. ESG ultimately is just an immediate risk that you need to incorporate into these frameworks. And at that point, I could probably stop and hand over to Lily. Thank you, everyone. I tried. Sorry, I know.
30 seconds to run through the data. Now, what Lily is going to show you, though, is what data could look like in the future. Go ahead. Why you go up and down? Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy to be here today to present our proposed Sustainability Investment Monitor Dashboard. I had a couple prelude to it, but I guess we'll just jump right into it because we are limited stretch for time. So, Devon, you want to pull it up? So basically, just to recap what was said by the earlier speakers, this dashboard is intended to help in building the value proposition for
attracting investment in the Caribbean. Because we know based on the poll we would have seen, data is a big challenge. It's ranked number one in terms of one of the mitigating factors for attracting investments in the Caribbean. And we know that in the Caribbean, data is usually a challenge in terms of getting the right data, assimilating it, and presenting it in a comparable format. So what we've intended to do here, and I must implore you, don't rely on the numbers. The numbers are dummy numbers. Given the time constraint, we didn't get comparable across the region, so we decided not to use what we had and just go with dummy information, just to present to you what we intend to achieve using the new data set that is required under the ESG consideration of risk and reporting. So as Maria would have indicated before, the traditional metrics, for example, GDP per capita, you're looking at unemployment, inflation, et cetera, doing business index, et cetera, all nice concepts, nice metrics, but it doesn't capture the social measures, the environmental measures that are all needed now in our sustainability hat. When we're wearing that hat, we're seeing now all investors are driven now looking to see what are these indicators, the new measures, the new language we're hearing, carbon emission, carbon credit, you're looking at water harnessing, water treatment, all these new terms we're hearing, and now new information we need to capture to look at investments and where funds should flow in the different regions. And just to recap again, as Maria indicated, we're not looking at this at a country level, but rather a regional level, because decoupling the economic growth from environmental decline needs to be done at a global level rather than a country or individual level. So what we intend to do with this dashboard is capture information, both at macro level that we've discussed before, but additionally looking more at what the impact of some of these investments have been on the environment and the mitigating factors. So Davon, if we can go into, say, Jamaica. So if we choose Jamaica, for example, you're seeing time series information from, say, 2017 to 2022. You're seeing the number of investments over this period in number, and then the value of investments over this period. What we've done is this is a pilot project looking at 7 jurisdictions, 6 of which we have our EY Caribbean footprint, and then EY Latin American footprint. We looked at 5 of the pillars that are being discussed at the forum today. And again, using dummy information, we would present to you where the investments lie within these pillars. Additionally, what you're seeing would be the ESG metrics being considered, carbon emissions, you're looking at energy usage, you're looking at the traditional job creations, et cetera. And of course, your contribution to GDP at the bottom. If we go into one of these sectors, IT, for example, right, so it drills down now into specific projects within the IT sector. So you're seeing the sector size, total investment by projects, total investment in value. Then we can actually drill down to see where these investors coming from. You can see the incentives in those particular centers or industries. You can see your available talent pool, the jobs created within that sector, the annual carbon emissions, monthly energy usage, and then specifically you can drill down into individual projects if you go in one further to see the actual size of that investment relative to the sector size, the investment, and other metrics specific to that sector, again, within the arena of ESG terminologies and ESG measurements. So just focusing back on what Marcus said as well, there's a need for the reporting. The standards are coming, and they're coming consistently across the board soon. So once you have the information tracked and captured in this manner, it would be easier to flow into your financials in terms of how you're going to disclose the information. And what would be nice about this tool would be it would be considered, you're seeing everything comparable, real time. So once information is available, it'll be updated on a current basis so that the information you have at hand will be reliable, usable, and current. And I think it's very important that it's comparable as well, given that each sector within the region contributes at different levels to economic activity. And each sector as well is known, you would have various emissions, not all of them would be at the same level, so you would have, as Maria indicated, carbon offsets, carbon credits, etc., to be considered when it's looked at on a regional basis. So in terms, Maria, I don't know how much time I have again. Yeah? So in terms of the tool itself, the intention is to gather and capture the data, work with the IPAs, work with investors, etc., to keep the information current and live, and to present this on a platform that would be available for use, available for information update as they come available, so that it becomes a tool that is readily available and current, so that investment decisions can be made looking at it holistically. Yeah? Thank you.
And just to tie all of this in together, and please start thinking about your questions. Do we have like 5 minutes for questions at least? Yeah? No? No, unfortunately, we can't take questions. 3 minutes? So does anybody have questions? So, yeah?
Thank you. Are you hearing me? Thank you for that presentation. This was very informative. I am involved in the private capital markets, particularly in Jamaica. So I think it was Carlos had a big focus, I think, on FDIs and government, and I wanted to find out what is the relationship that would need to be fostered with the local capital markets, and what is it that the local capital will need to bring to the table to be able for these relationships to be fostered. Because I got the impression that he was looking a lot at the FDIs, relationships with governments and so on.
Right.
But the local capital needs to be part of it.
Of course. So if we think about the problem we have, the solution could only come from having an entire ecosystem. So from the local capital markets, we should be able to have green projects to go on our stock exchanges. We should be able to have our bankers who are now actually looking at their portfolios, understanding what their investee companies are doing to ensure that they are complying and they are going to be sustainable. So the local capital market, not just from funding, so we talk about green financing, very simple concept actually, which just means that you get lower interest rates, you get concessions if you have projects that are bringing renewables, anything green, anything that will help with climate change. So this cannot be done unless we have the whole ecosystem working. The government's facilitating through the regulations, the capital market funding the projects, and the projects making themselves bankable. That's answer it. Go ahead.
I was also trying to get an understanding of the relationship that the global investors will have with the local capital markets.
So I can tell you right now, we work with the Climate Change Fund, and what they're looking for is local capital for bankers, etc., to be able to lend that money to, and they administer it. So there's a lot of relationships going on. And even if you think of from an FDI perspective, they want to look at what is the banking environment as well. So it all fits in. It all fits in.
When I'm going beyond banking, I'm also thinking of private equity.
Private equity. Well, we are short of private equity in the region, at least in Trinidad. I know Jamaica is much better. But even from a private equity side, again, you should be looking at when investors are coming in, how do you get access to that? So you bring the local capital to the projects. Any other questions? One in the back. Last one. Last one, or they're going to kick us out?
Good afternoon. Is the platform open source?
Which platform are we talking about? The FDI one?
The dashboard that you presented. Is it open source?
We haven't reached that far in the design. But yes, the plan would be for people to be able to plug into it and be able to get the data in real time. Okay, that's it? Or, yeah. Nobody else. Thank you, everyone. I mean, any further questions? We're right outside. We'll be there for at least half an hour or so. We'll be happy to chat and explain anything else further.
That was absolutely fantastic. I was so sorry that I wasn't able to see more of the dashboard. I thought the practical use, the visuals, being able to see the different categories, plugging into the categories, how the data that was collated, how it could be really understood. I thought that was really impressive. Congratulations to the EY Caribbean and, of course, everything that you continue to do. So, ladies and gentlemen, what does this mean? Did you just say celebrate and drink wine? I was looking more for something like, wow, Terry, we're going to miss not seeing you in the morning. We're going to miss wondering what it is that you drink or what pill you pop to be like this all day, every day. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been an amazing audience, and I just want to thank you for attending the 2022 Caribbean Investment Forum on behalf of Caribbean Export, of course, the Ministry of Trade and Industry, Trinidad and Tobago, KIPA, European Union, CARICOM, CDB, Media 21, Thoughtful Agency, EY, Republic Bank Limited, Draper Startup House. Thank you, thank you, thank you. To the hard-working planning team, to Penny and the hard-working production team who've been working behind the scenes. None of this could be possible without you. So the reminder is, we all have a part to play in building a smarter, greener, more sustainable, more resilient Caribbean. We wish all of you who might be visiting, who are jumping on planes tonight or maybe over the weekend, we wish you journeying mercies. We hope that you will get to your destination in one piece and that you will take back all the information you got from this forum and that they can be actionable. To the locals, we thank you for the warm hospitality. Trinidad and Tobago, you guys have welcomed us with open arms. You have fed us good food. You have celebrated us despite our differences, our cultures, and our backgrounds. I think I speak on behalf of everyone by saying Trinidad has become a second home to many, many of us. And we wish you also, a safe journey back to your respective homes. And as for me, it has been a pleasure serving you in the capacity of host since Tuesday at our welcome reception all the way to the very final day here at the Caribbean Investment Forum. Therefore, I say adios, au revoir, arrivederci, sayonara, tai ching, te ahora, goodbye. And earlier I said that at a different conference there was a Korean and I did not know the language well. We had an ambassador here from the Korean embassy and he came across, he gave me his card and he said if I would like to say something in Korean, I should say Annyeong haseyo. Annyeong haseyo. Goodbye, take care, it has been a pleasure.
Last, now everybody go to breakfast. Shayo.